president talked about denaturalizing him. And this is someone who is a step away from naturalized parents himself. Got to talk about that. I want you to think about what being an American really is about, who this country belongs to. This land is your land. This land is my land. This land was made for you and me. Thank you, Woody Guthrie. Somehow or another, we don't sing that song anymore, but we should, Ariel. We really should. Um, and we should think about indigenous people today because this is their land. Until we make things right with them, nothing will be right. Until we make things right with African Americans who built this land, not for free, but with unpaid labor, it won't be right. Until you make things right, everything you do is going to crumble, as they said in The Color Purple. That's just biblical, everybody. This country belongs to everybody. It should be fair to everybody. It's not been fair to everybody. And we're fighting the fight. So let's think about that today as we move into this holiday weekend. It should be about more than barbecue. We got to look at this big, beautiful bill that threatens to barbecue a whole lot of Americans. More than 51,000 Americans will die excess deaths in the next year alone. And that's just off the top. That's a conservative estimate from Yale University, their study. But think about a country in which corporations make billions and billions and billions of dollars, and yet their full-time workers need to be on SNAP. They need Medicaid. Some of the biggest companies, of course, everyone talks about Walmart, who, as part of their intake process, people have been shown how to apply for government benefits. Because although they're working full-time, or they might be working 39.5 hours a week, just shy of 40 hours, it's awful. They are shown how to get government assistance because they know that they're not being paid enough money to make it without it. That's Walmart, that's McDonald's, that's Amazon, that's Kroger, that's Uber, that's FedEx, that's Dollar Tree, that's Dollar General, that's Target, that's Burger King, that's Taco Bell, Wendy's, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walgreens, CVS. Yeah, all of these people and corporations who could help me with my show as, as sponsors, but we need to be able to call people out, everybody. We've got to come up with another way. And that list comes from the Government Accountability Office from their 2020 survey. So let's think about this. This big, beautiful bill is going to move $1 trillion from healthcare into the military. I said $1 trillion with a T. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. As everyone is looking at the Diddy trial today, I'll certainly look at it, but I'll look at it from a whole lot of different perspectives because it speaks to the industry and what the record industry does as it shapes culture and how it misshapes our culture and hurts us and who these players are. But that's a different story for a different day. Right now, the Senate has had their bite at this apple. Now the House has gotten this bite at its apple, and with these carve-outs, most famously from Senator Murkowski from Alaska, she's gotten a lot of carve-outs. Basically, she's got an exception. She's made Alaska an exception to this bill, and several other senators have too. And many other U.S. House men in the U.S. House of Representatives, they've done that too. Well, we talked about the carve-outs. That's how this is able to pass. So your district or their states will be exempted from the most onerous parts of this bill. But the rest of us have to take the hit. So we're going to see a whole lot. So we got to talk about this right now. What about this big, beautiful bill? It is so painful to think about this. Attorney Mark Fancher, a brilliant author and civil libertarian, violence interrupter, T.O. Hardeman, brilliant organizer in Chicago, former gubernatorial candidate. He almost got 30% of the vote himself, so he's our own Zoran Mamdani in the state of Illinois. And Ariel Gold, the Fellowship of Reconciliation Executive Director. I want to start with you because indeed, just on your peace and justice crusade, praise the Lord, you were just in Israel. Thank God you got back safe and sound. Fighting for justice over there. It took you 4.5 hours to get into the country. If you want to know who you are, and now you were just arrested in Washington. What was going on?
Well, as this real big, hideous bill was being debated the day before it finally got voted on, repairs of the breach, Reverend Barber convened people of faith and conscience to show up at our Capitol and take action against the policy murder that's going to take place with this bill. And we carried coffins over to the Supreme Court and then out into the street. That different coffins had different states on them, and how many people are will lose food stamp benefits or Medicaid, and people are going to die. Let's be clear. When you take away Medicaid from people, people are going to die. Lots of American people. And I was one of about 15 people that we went inside the Capitol inside the Capitol Rotunda, where the bill was being discussed, and in front of the statue of suffragettes and women who have made this country better. We started praying, and this was the second time in 2 months that I started praying inside there, and the police came over and said that was not allowed, and we just kept on praying against this ugly bill. We read the words of Isaiah: "Woe to those who legislate evil against the widow and the orphan, and cause the death of people through this legislation." And we were hauled out in handcuffs. Not the first time, may not be the last time. This issue is real personal for me. My mom was on food stamps when I was growing up, and on and off cash assistance when needed. And I managed my way through graduate school and got my degree in social work as a single mother, thanks to Section 8 housing and stretching food stamps, because it was already, or SNAP benefits as we call them today, it was already far, far, far too little. And during that time, while I was in graduate school, my babysitter was driving both of my kids, and there was a terrible car accident, and my son nearly died. He needed emergency surgery. We didn't know what was going to happen to him in that emergency surgery at the Children's Hospital. And then we were in the hospital for near 2 weeks. His back was broken, and recovering from the surgery and relearning how to walk. And it was Medicaid that paid for all of that. And Medicaid is some good insurance. You're not arguing about co-pays in the same way. You have to make sure you have doctors that take Medicaid, but Medicaid is the kind of insurance that all of us should have. But it was thanks to Medicaid that we were in the hospital for near 2 weeks. And it was thanks to Medicaid when they tried to kick us out of the hospital because Medicaid didn't want to keep paying. And I said, no, we're not leaving. We're not leaving. We're not leaving until I feel comfortable that my son is in the right place in his recovery. And we stayed on, and Medicaid paid for it, and my son is doing well today. So this is real personal to me, and I don't want, the next families that are coming up now, behind me, as I have a career with, a master's degree in social work, to not have the opportunities that I had, or to have suffering and death. So we were there praying in the Capitol, praying and taking action that made our action that day. And so it was about 15 of us inside the Capitol, and then about 22, I think it was, outside in the streets praying over coffins that were arrested out in the streets. May our actions that day have caused just one member of Congress who wasn't before questioning to question this real big, ugly bill. May we have put doubt in the mind of just one lawmaker.
But what do you think about these lawmakers who, Ariel, Mark Fancher, Attorney Fancher, Teal Hardeman, but first you, Ariel, they know that this is a bad bill. They know what this is going to do, but they are not just being offered carve-outs. honestly, knowing the wheeling and dealing that goes on behind the scenes, you don't know how they might have been threatened on a personal level. It's not. Hey, I'm just saying. That's all these thrillers that you see in the movies. This stuff is real. This is real stuff. But I wish they would do what Senator Tillis has done and just say, I'm not going to vote on it, and I'm out of here. 'Cause I know what's coming. What say you? Because so many of them know that this is a bad deal. They know this is a horrible bill. They know it.
Bill. Money all to the weapons manufacturer. You said it the other day. What did bomb ever do for me? No bomb ever got me a job. No bomb ever gave me housing. Bombs destroy housing. You want to raise healthcare prices? Invest in some bombs. You want to increase the number of people that need healthcare and the cost of it? Give that money to bomb makers. But I just pray they're sleeping tonight and they grow a pair and a bit of a conscience, right? Because if you can't take a stand on this bill, if you can't stand up and and uh, and vote against the death of American people, the death from a lack of health care and lack of housing and a lack of food, if you can't vote against that, you don't have the cojones to vote against that or the moral capacity to comprehend that, you don't belong in Congress. And that applies to both sides of the aisle here.
Oh,
If you can't figure this out, you don't belong there. Go get another job. You go work for lawmakers.
Yeah, this is not partisanship. Look,
No.
I tell you, I'm way
No.
past because it's two wings and one bird. Really, this is terrible. Attorney Mark Fancher, what say you? My father often says that budgets are moral documents. you know, let you know what someone's priorities are. What do you make of this?
On Friday, many of the congressional representatives, the senators, will be marching in parades along with millions and millions of people in this country, waving flags and talking about how glorious and wonderful America is. But there are many of us who will be sitting back and looking at America and looking at what it really is. And it's unfortunately and tragically a country that has no hesitation to drop bombs on people,
Yeah.
to finance genocide. It has no hesitation to redirect trillions of dollars away from the poor and the needy and into the coffers of major corporations and wealthy families. It has no hesitation to take food off the tables of poor people. It has no hesitation to celebrate and honor as its leader a vile, despicable, amoral, immoral, vicious man who sits in a White House that was built by enslaved Africans. It is a country that would dare to go and to place Ariel Gold in cuffs because she dares to prey on government property. It is a country that is not to be celebrated. It's one to be mourned. And I think that uh, while the US is on a fast track towards spiritual death, we do see signs of spiritual life. And I think that if we juxtapose the so called Big Beautiful Bill with the outcome of the mayoral contest in New York, what we see are two different things which are headed for a major clash. On the one hand, you have a bill which really represents and manifests an agenda of the power and the powerful and the vicious and the corporatist and the capitalist and the imperialist, throwing everything into one big package so that people are fooled and deceived and don't see its particulars and don't recognize its ultimate consequences. But at bottom, it represents a vehicle the uh, for them reaching the conclusion of an agenda, which is one that really represents their vision of what this country should be. a country that is at their disposal and which is there for them to plunder and rob and to exploit. If you compare that with the platform and the agenda of the victor in New York, you see a democratic socialist agenda which looks at what is it that people need. Do people need housing? Do people need food? Do they need clothing? Do they need opportunities to uh, have health care and the basic necessities of life? And to the extent that government is able to provide those things, then that's the agenda. And so it really comes down to uh, whether people want to really change the paradigm. Right now, the masses of people in this country are in a very defensive posture. They see this big behemoth of a bill barreling down the road, and they feel like we've got to stop that. We really are in a position where our energy and our resources have to be focused on stopping it. That paradigm needs to change. We need to have a people's agenda, one that is advancing human needs, which is far larger and far more intimidating, which is rolling in the direction of capitalists and corporations and the military industrial complex and those who would seek to exploit and dominate this country and to make them cower in fear and to fear the wrath and the moral outrage of an enraged population. That's what needs to change, and that's what needs to happen.
You know, you're reminding me before I bring up Chaparral. I'm glad that you joined us, Chaparral. Um, it was one of Michael Moore's movies. I forget which Ariel and Chaparral, but Mark, I want you to speak to this. He was in France. And of course, I think it was might have been Fahrenheit 9/11. They were really going against war. And he was speaking to a group of French citizens, and they said, you know, our government is different. Our society is different than yours. You know, in America, you're afraid of the government, but in France, the government is afraid of us. The former used to be true for Americans. Somehow or another, uh, the majority of us have been cowered into and are cowering in fear, as you put it. And we beat down the people who who inspire us to rise up and stand up for yourselves. Get up, stand up. You know, don't give up the fight. You have rights, and we appreciate those people after they're gone. But we're going to have to grow up in our politics, Mark, so that we can appreciate these people in real time and stand up for ourselves. My father says, no one's going to save us for us but us. Mark, I mean, that's it.
Yeah, the fact is that people in this country have been cleverly deceived.
Hmm.
You're absolutely correct that there was a time when government feared the people because the government as an institution had some degree of integrity. That if you elected someone to office, then that person was going to, in all likelihood, do their level best to try and represent their constituency, to try and make the people's interest first and foremost in the work that they do as legislators or in if they're executives or whatever it is that they might do. Those who are powerful and those who seek to exploit America, those who are oppressive, recognized that some time ago. And they decided that what they would do is to just basically buy the government. They purchased it, they locked it down, they control it, and it is no longer a government that is truly representative of the people who participate in it.
Mhm.
The rhetoric continues to be that, yes, the way that you change things in this country is to register to vote, to elect people who are going to represent you and represent your interest, and that's how we bring about change. That is not the way that you change things in this country. That is a way to walk right into the mouth of the lion. That is a way to walk right into the trap that's been set by the oligarchy, by those who control this country, really, because they have perpetuated this illusion of democracy when the US lost its democracy a long time ago. It doesn't matter who you elect. That person is going to do the bidding of those who are rich and powerful, guaranteed. If they refuse to do the bidding of the rich and the powerful, they will be disposed of, if not right away, ultimately. And they certainly will be disposed of if they, in their work, are effective at what they're doing. Because the powerful control both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and they've told you that you have no other options whatsoever. And so there is no opportunity for the people to strike fear into the hearts of the powerful because the powerful dominate the political machinery of this country and have deceived people into believing that the only way that they have to express themselves politically is by participation in this process. So the only way that the powerful will ever get to the point where they're afraid of the masses of the people is when they are quite forthright in saying to those in power, we are rejecting your political machine. We are walking away from the Democratic Party, we're walking away from the Republican Party, and we're forming our own political force, which will demand that you make changes. And if you don't demand those, if you don't meet our demands, we will crush you. We will crush you. And that's the only language that they will understand. And I think that in order for that threat to be real and for it to really mean anything to those in power, it can't be a threat that's issued just by the population in this country. It has to be a global threat. It has to be a threat that's made through a unified voice of all of those people throughout the global South who have the same enemies as the poor in this country have. It has to be a voice that comes from those in all parts of the world who are in solidarity with those who are oppressed globally. It has to be one that recognizes, acknowledges, and calls out the international uh, reach of imperialism and identifies for it the fact that it knows that its vulnerabilities and its weak points and how this unified voice globally is prepared to strike at its vulnerabilities and to bring it down. That's the only way that we're going to win this. But saying that we're just going to win this by defeating a bill, electing somebody to office, is really for us to engage in ongoing self delusion.
Well, I think that I hear you. That having been said, I think you gotta vote. You gotta push through this process that we have, but you also have to do what you're saying because we never ever in our most powerful moments, we never ever stopped at the reason we got the Voting Rights Act and fair housing, Ariel and Chaparral and Mark, and you know this because we were out in the streets. What did President Obama say to the Titans of Wall Street? He said, I'm the only one standing in between you and the pitchforks. Even though they ultimately, pulled together laws that favored themselves, it's we have got people are going to have to march. They're going to have to work, and they're going to have to decide on the system that they really really want. Because we can see how compromised the system is as we are looking at these senators and these congressmen they're all congressmen and women, these representatives in the lower house in both houses, they're getting carve outs. They're going to the White House and they're making deals, and they're saving their districts, they're saving their states, but the rest of us are going down the tubes. Chaparral, you said you have 3 foster kids with special needs who need Medicaid access. Because indeed, those kids who are in the foster care system, they're automatically on Medicaid, and about half of America's children are born using Medicaid anyway. I mean, I don't know why we don't have a universal single payer system. That's that's ultimately what we need. But Chaparral, so how does this big beautiful bill hit you?
Like I said, Santita, I have actual total 4 foster kids. all of them have Medicaid, which is called youth care when they're in the foster care system, and 3 of them have special needs, which means that they not only need traditional health care services, but they have one has stage 4 cancer, and the other 2 are autistic. So we are constantly at the doctor. So I have no idea on how this new change, which is if it passes, is supposed to start in January, how this would affect their health care. I think that what we're seeing here is that the government is willing to allow grandmas to die, parents to die, and children to die. Because when you remove the necessities such as Medicaid and access to health care, that means that people with all of these pre-existing conditions will.
Oh, Chaparral, you went out. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what, Mark, Ariel, before as we get Chaparral back on, you see what she's dealing with as a foster mother. What is she supposed to do? You see, she's got one daughter in with stage 4 cancer. I've talked to Chaparral. This is a young teenager, stage 4 cancer. She did not want these children to be separated. They're all siblings. You've got 3 who are on the spectrum. And she is fighting every day with the system as it is presently constructed to get them the life-saving assistance they need. Chaparral, are you back up?
Yeah, can you hear me now? I'm sorry
Yeah.
about that.
No, we can. But I was explaining that, and I want you to go right back into what you were saying. Um,
Yeah, I was saying that, these children that I have and many more need
okay.
this access to live. And so
Mhm.
what happens is that they will no longer be able to have access to high quality medical care to get their daily benefits. They have therapy, they have physical therapy, occupational mental health therapy, all of these things that Medicare cover, their eyeglasses, their prescription drugs. Could you imagine if I had to not only foster these children, but also to pay for cancer treatment? I mean, she has stage 4 cancer. These are real life issues that Americans are facing. And we cannot continue to squeeze orange juice out of a dry piece of fruit. And I don't know what, besides the issue of healthcare, it's the housing expensive, the food expenses. What are they expecting us to do here in America? I mean, you are stripping away everything so you can collapse this entire government. Because if we are bombarded now with healthcare costs, then that's going to take away from our food costs, our housing costs. Everybody's going to run into debt, because we see that what happened before we had Obamacare. People were underwater with debt, medical debt, and we will see that this will continue to happen. So we're going to lose the 16 million people that gain health care. They're going to all be removed from that healthcare system. And I'm trying to say, when I think about the the actual congressmen, and we don't have people these days, Santita, with who are willing to die for the cause. And that's where I see that Americans and our leadership are failing us, is that they don't lay down. They cutting side deals. It's easier to cut a side deal than to live with integrity and stand up and fight. You have very few people who are willing to lay down their life for what they believe in. And we need more people that are willing to do that, because that's what it's going to take. But I believe that once they collapse this medical system in rural America and white America, who receives the bulk of this Medicaid and food stamps, when they feel that they are hungry, there will be a major uprising. And what we haven't talked about is this new notion of Black people sitting out this fight. And sometimes, Santita, I promise you, you know, when we are out there fighting, and I've been on the front line, and you've been on the front line, Mark been on the front line, Ariel's been on the front line, fighting against this system. But it's different when black people go out there because we're attacked, we're brutalized, we're killed. And so that's why they said we're going to sit down. And I'm sitting up here debating in my mind, in my mind, Santita, I want to go out here. I'm like, we need to be storming the Capitol on July 4th. We need to be right there in the halls of Congress. We need to bum rush, as they used to say back in the day, the halls of Congress today in my mind. But I know that it won't end well. I won't get a slap on the wrist like the January 6th. They'll be pulling me
but
in there into jail.
well,
You know
hold
what I
on.
mean?
Well, hold on, because I think bum rush, no, but to have a peaceful protest, what the Reverend was the mayor, Reverend Jackson was the mayor of Resurrection City. Because I've talked to people from the Poor People's Campaign. I said the Poor People's Campaign didn't go anywhere. We had to keep on moving behind Dr. King's death. But we went, my parents and Dr. King's staff left Memphis and continued the crusade and went to Washington and set up an encampment on the mall leading up to the Capitol. And that's what needs to happen, I think, Ariel and Mark and Chaparral today. Chaparral, I want you to speak to that because if you don't have to bum rush, you can sit. What Dr. King's plan was to have poor people from all over, from all walks of life, sit on that Capitol and not move until the war on poverty was declared and poverty was eradicated. You don't need to follow the January 6th example. Nobody needs to do that. But what you need to do is go there and be in their faces and not move. And do what Reverend did. Reverend used to take people into the cafeteria, the U.S. Senate cafeteria. He took them in by the hundreds. And they walked through, and when they had the bill at the end, they said, well, who's going to pay for it? He said, we're already paying for it. Everybody eat. That's it.
Yeah,
We have to engage in protest again. I'm sorry.
yeah. I was going to suggest this, that in the same way that I was talking about how the political process was purchased by the powerful, they have also purchased civil disobedience and street protest.
We'll say that one
Uh,
more time because
yeah,
that's
they have gotten that under control. They co-opted it. The police all know how to deal with it. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with early on as an aspiring revolutionary is to understand that my job was not necessarily to tell people, the masses of people, where they should go, but to look at where they're already going
that's
and to
it.
help them get there faster. And one of the things that I have marveled at over the years is the ways in which, almost intuitively, the broad masses of Black people in particular have known exactly what to do in terms of dealing with the oppressor. Uh, so that when you look at the Iraq War, when there were so many white activists and others who were in the streets protesting and demanding an end to the war, and they were saying, where are the Black people? Why aren't they out here? Black people were very shrewdly doing something that was effective. They would not have been effective out there on the streets. But what they did know is that the success of any military campaign, which relies on boots on the ground, troops, was heavily dependent on Black soldiers participating in it. And so they very quietly and very systematically said, we're not going to let our kids go. And it was effective in making that war come to an end much faster than it normally would have. And the Army acknowledged that. They did a study and said, we can't fight this war without Black soldiers. The
Right.
preachers, the teachers, the parents, the coaches, they're all telling the kids not to enlist, and we can't fight it. I completely agree with those who have said that in this period, when there are calls for mass manifestations and demonstrations, uh, that Black people have said, no, we're not going to go out there. And they know intuitively that And they know consciously because they have listened to what Donald Trump has said, that he was just waiting, and he has been waiting for an opportunity to deploy the military to kill a lot of Black people. I mean, he talked about doing that in response to Black Lives Matter demonstrations. And so they know that that's not necessarily the way to go. That we have to find other ways to deal with this, and we can't be lazy about it and default to the ways in which things that worked decades ago. We have to think creatively about how to do it. That's our tradition. And back during the earliest years of the Black Panther Party, they were under no illusion that the government was coming to provide for the basic needs of the people. You know, Chaparral has basic needs. Her household has basic needs. And there are many who would look at that and say, well, we need to figure out a way to get the government to respond to her. The government is not coming to rescue her household.
Right.
And the Panthers understood that the government was not coming to rescue the households of the people in the communities that they worked in. And so they took it upon themselves to make sure that everybody's basic needs were satisfied by going around to grocery stores and asking them for their quality control food, the food that they couldn't keep on the shelves, the day old bread and everything else. And they built up food pantries. They got old beat up cars and they created their own ambulance service and escort services for elders who needed to get to the doctors. They went to the physicians themselves and enlisted them in an effort to provide free healthcare and services and sickle cell screening and other things. They set up their own after school programs. They set up breakfast for children programs. They took care of things for their community because they knew government was not going to do it. And we're at that point. We can't continue to believe that the government is going to respond to us in the way that we need them to respond. And now the opportunities are even greater for resources that were not available to the Panthers. Now we have international connections. We have opportunities to get Venezuelan oil. We have opportunities to get crops that are grown in other countries that have populations that are friendly to ours. We have opportunities even to send our kids to Cuba's medical school so that they can become doctors and come back and serve our communities. We need to think creatively like that because otherwise we're going to perish.
Anyone want to respond to that? Because I absolutely agree. As we remember, when President Chavez of Venezuela said, "You're having problems with gas? Let me send it to you." That's we have to do that, and other people do that. And even if other people didn't, we have to think creatively. We have to think outside the box, because you know what? If you look at it, Mark and Ariel and Chaparral, that's basically what President Trump did when he went over to the Middle East and when his family had gone there. They've been cutting deals. What we need to do is cut deals for the people, period. And the door is open. And I have found that, you have to do for yourself. Can't wait for all these other people. Democrats aren't going to save you. The Republicans are not going to save you. That is not what they do. They save themselves. And in fact, they're two wings of the same bird. They're protecting the same interest. One does it, one snatches the Band-Aid off, another one pulls it off very gently and rubs your head as you bleed to death. So Chaparral, what do you foresee? I mean, because you've got these children, what are you going to do?
Santita, Black people are probably the most resourceful people that I could ever imagine. We make, if it's a will, it's a way, as they used to say back in the day.
Yeah.
And if it's a will, it's a way. We're going to continue to move forward. You know me, I don't mind going into debt if it's going to keep me alive. So if we have to self-fund this healthcare, then that's what we have to do. The reality is that I'm hoping that they do continue the health care for the foster care system, but we know that it is under attack. That's part of the bill that they did say that they're going to attack some of the foster care system. And so we are concerned, but what can we do? We're going to take care of the kids the best way we can. However, I feel that once white America feels the difference, we are going to see that there's going to be a huge uprising from the white community. and I'm frankly ready for it. I'm
I
waiting on
think
it.
it's coming. You know what? Honestly,
Yeah.
I think that's coming. The other part is what I also see coming, Mark and Cheryl and Ariel, is a looming crackdown. That is martial law. They're getting prepared for that because they know where people are going. But what they're not prepared for, Black people are accustomed to oppression because we in this country, Ariel, and I don't need to tell you, Ariel and Mark and Chappelle, we have taken the most horrifying things that can be meted out here, save for indigenous people. We have been raped. We are the product of, as my father said, white forefathers and black foremothers. That's real. We have worked I mean, we have worked without being paid. I mean, part of the reason you can't, and as God would have it, you can't get around Monticello and Thomas Jefferson without talking about Sally Hemings now, because she's a metaphor for what we all know is true. They wrote about Sally Hemings in Ebony 50 years ago when the white community said, oh, this cannot be true. All Black folks knew that this is absolutely true. And you know what? Let me tell you this. My brother went to UVA, and they were kind enough to take us on the special tour of Monticello, because it's actually a museum. And we went in there, Ariel and Mark and Chaparral. And by the time I asked the curator, the head of the museum, all of these questions, he pulled me aside and asked me if I was an historian, because I had read so much about Sally Hemings and her life. When you go in there, there are rooms behind rooms behind rooms. I've read the letters of the great men and famous men of the day who wrote letters talking about these white servants who looked just like Thomas Jefferson, Mark. It was like, wait a minute. You all are still denying this? We understand this system and we understand the people in it. We understand how it works. So the question is now, I think that we are very resourceful. But now, Ariel, now you're going to see white people who are now beginning to get very, very angry. Where do you think that anger is going to go, Ariel? I mean, are you hearing anything from people? I think she froze. Well, Ari, I mean, oh, okay, okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
I want to agree with Mark on a bunch of points. I want to agree with him on the problems of performance protest these days. I don't think we spend enough time as activists, myself as an activist, thinking about, when the civil rights movement happened, that was a unique and new tactic at the time, and therefore really powerful. And yet when we simply try to duplicate that, and in a different climate, right, without the same, quite honestly, we can do these mass arrests now that are prearranged with the police and this and that, and it's performative. And we need to really, really get back to thinking about when we're going to do this kind of protest, when we're going to do civil disobedience, where do we expect that change to happen? Like, where is that catalyst? What mind are we hoping to change? Where do we think that something might shift, right? Or break through, rather than just make us feel good. And I heard Mark talking about as well, like what I heard was some of that difference between the different risk levels of different people that engage in the kind of action that I took yesterday. And let's just say it, I'm a white woman. I can do that really safely, and I have the resources, to be away from home and with my kids. And those of us that have that, when it's strategic, we need to go do it for those that are taking care of kids that are going to be kicked off of Medicaid and off of benefits and so on. And that's a white responsibility. So, I want to speak to that. And I want to say that at no time, as we take these actions and as we persevere and push for this political change that we need, do we expect things to get better tomorrow? And does that mean that we don't have to be in that resourcefulness, and that we don't have to be thinking mutual aid? I may be fine, at this point in my life, and I've gone through, graduate school, and I have a job, and this and that. But, what's that person down the street or on the street? What's it like for them? And so we need to be thinking beyond ourselves, and we need to be, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Poor People's Campaign and Repairers of the Breach, is the intentionality there of hearing from those who are affected, and yet not expecting it to be those who are affected that put their bodies on the line that day. They probably got to get back to that job that they're barely hanging on to, that doesn't pay enough. So, there are a lot of complexities to the ways that we take action, and who we rely on, or where we think that change is going to come. And yeah, we're headed. It already is some deep repression, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. And we need to be really thoughtful and really strategic about how we go about keeping each other safe and trying to make this change that's so needed. This is not a light or frivolous moment by a long shot.
And be courageous, because it's going to cost some of us everything, but we're paying everything. Freedom is not free. It just isn't. Mark, I see you kind of chomping at the bit.
Oh, I don't know if that's what I was doing, but I did want to comment that I agree that white workers are on the verge of an uprising. But here's my concern, and that is that it's going to be um, January 6th on steroids. That it will be a major mass uprising, but it will be racialized. That it will be for the purpose of ensuring the protection of white workers, and taking from the government that which they need in order to preserve the white working class. But the racial chauvinism, the notions of white supremacy, which are pervasive among that population, will not magically disappear. And even if they succeed in an uprising, even if they somehow manage to take the reins of government, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a good thing for communities of color, because it still leaves for those communities the challenge of dealing with a large number of people whose racial views are totally backwards, and who would not necessarily see this as a revolution for all people.
Well, you know what? I'm going to go around everyone and get a comment, a closing comment, because we will see just what's going to happen here with this bill. It looks like they're going to wheel and deal enough, twist enough arms, or whatever it is and whatever else it is that they're going to do to get this through. And maybe this is the push that we need. It's very painful to think about that, though. Shapiro Wells, what say you?
Thank you, Santita, for having me on. I think that the bill will pass, unfortunately. I think that we have to begin to plan a strategy on how to deal with the deep cuts that we're going to see. We have to begin to, if we haven't already, contact our congressmen, our senators, our mayors, our governors, and press them on making a big stance. Nobody, not one person, whether it affects you today or me today, it's going to be somebody else tomorrow. So it can't be just because, oh, I have health care, I have services, I have my job, that you're not thinking about the other people who don't. Even though a lot of this stuff doesn't affect me personally, but it may affect a family member or a friend. And we should all, as Americans, have compassion for other people. And I'm hoping that if this wake-up call that America is about to be forced to have, that we start with love and compassion for one another, and then we will be able to put forth a better effort to get what we need. Because one thing that may actually come forth is that because the system in all is going to be collapsed and the people are going to be pressing for change, we may get a better product out of it. And that's my ultimate goal in prayer.
Mark Fancher?
I want to sign on to Chaparral's call for love and compassion for all of us to demonstrate one for the other. And I'd like to add to it a call for us to be smart. We understand what we're facing, or at least we should. We've really got to rouse ourselves from the slumber that we've been in, the self-delusion about where our help is going to come from. It's only going to come from ourselves. And as bleak as things may look, we have to reflect on the fact that there have been periods in our history which have been much darker, have presented far more in the way of challenge. And God is a good God. He's always brought us through it. But as he's bringing us through it, I think we have an obligation to begin thinking seriously about how we're going to craft a new way for us to advance and for us to live together.
Ariel Gold, you get the final word.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention, you were talking about you think it's going to pass, and there have been amendments. And I want to mention a good amendment that got thrown in there in the Senate. So, light shines through. The ban on trans medical services was removed, and my dear friend Rabbi Abby Stein, Palestinian rights activist and trans activist, let me know that. And that actually may hold it up a bit in the House, because some of the hardcore MAGA may find that unacceptable. So, the Lord works in some funny ways. And I should also say Abby is a really close friend with Zohran Mamdani. And, all these things are connected. And so I want to say eyes on the prize in this moment. Let's try to kill this big, hideous bill, and let's try to protect each other and care for each other. And I want to echo what Mark said, that God is great, and we have the ability, right? God's not going to do it for us. That's not the kind of way God works. God's like, I'm going to, teach you what needs to be done, and then you got to do the work. You do the work. So we got our work laid out for us. And we got it laid out for us in stopping this war in Gaza and preventing things from escalating again. In Iran, we got our work laid out for us, because I was also there. So I got arrested on Monday, and then on Tuesday, over 100 of my friends that I was filming them instead were arrested, because they protested inside cafeterias on the House side at 3 different buildings. I think it was, I forget if it was 2 or 3 cafeterias right at lunchtime, calling for an arms embargo. And as the Christians United for Israel, arms embargo to Israel, and as the Christians United for Israel conference was going off, and hundreds arrested, just making some beautiful noise in the halls of power. So we got all kinds of different tools at our disposal and different ways to go about this. And let's keep our eyes on the prize. And remember, I like what Mark said as well. We've had tough times before. We know how to do this. So
we can do this. And as we look at the Middle East, let us remember Haiti. Haiti, Haiti, Haiti. That is in our hemisphere. That is our responsibility. That is a mess that we have made. We have made them pay for daring to be free. We need to remember that. Let us remember our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico as they seek to be sovereign. Let us remember Sudan and Venezuela and Yemen. I mean, just there is so much. America could be the repairers of the breach, not the openers of it. You got to make a decision. The Bible says, choose this day whom ye will serve. Yeah. And I'm putting it right there, everybody, because we have a choice. We make a decision every single day. So think about that, everybody. Think about that. That's what this bill is about. As everyone is looking at Diddy, that has its own importance. but that's not going to put food on your table. What he has done is shape the culture. And we can have another discussion about that, because that has been its own issue. That having been said, let us look at this today. Let us look at this today and look at what we're going to do tomorrow. Because now the work begins. And maybe this is, Mark, maybe this is what we need to form a more perfect union. Because we've just been going along and we said, if Kamala had been elected, everything's going to be okay. Look, the dollar was failing when she was about to be elected. We were already more than $30 trillion in debt when she was running. We have to make a decision about what our priorities are going to be. We've shifted $1 trillion from healthcare into the military. Is that what you want? You're the one who has to tell people that works for you or it doesn't work for you. Think about that. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show. Happy 4th of July, everybody.